What event or incident happened at your job that caused a mass firing or mass quitting? Viewers Edition. Story 1. Oh boy, I have a good walk-off story. Back in 2017, I worked for Panera Bread as their new delivery driver when the corporation wanted in on the new fad. So I was the guinea pig for the new service from Panera Bread, okay? New drivers were hired and everything was running smoothly. Then the buyout happened. Panera Bread got bought out by the sister company of Cinnabon. Now we are all worried about this new corporation. What's going to happen to our jobs? Our boss said, "Oh, don't worry, you're not going to lose your jobs." He was so wrong. I noticed my hours were being cut down by almost 1 day a week. Then, one by one, everyone's been noticing pay cuts, and then finally, the nail in the coffin. I was on vacation in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I get a phone call the same time. "Do you want to come in for work?" And I said, "Do you think I'll be able to come in? I'm in Pittsburgh." She goes, "Oh, sorry." And when I got back, they ripped into me saying, "You have been on call at all times." And I was just angry. I hid the anger in my tone, saying, "You knew I was on vacation." So I looked for a new job and ended up going to Hertz to rent a car. So I thought, hey, I'm going to stay on just for Sundays to make extra money. Oh boy, the next team meeting, we all found out the drivers were going to be fired within 2 weeks and were preparing to move them into another position during the meeting on my day off. Walked in and handed in my resignation. My uniform said I'm out and walked away a few months later. Found out every driver quit because of what I did. Oh boy, I had the biggest smile. I caused a major walkout of all the drivers from Panera Bread. The reason being, Panera signed a deal with Uber for their new Uber Eats program. The drivers were ticked off. Now they're gone. Thank you, greedy corporations, for doing what you do. Story 2. I worked at a plant that built office furniture for about 7 years. The job was pretty good, except that overtime was mandatory. I was assured at the beginning that overtime would be rare. Cut to 4 years later, and we're working between 60 to 70 hours per week. And keep in mind, the parts we're building weigh between 10 and 50 pounds, and we're supposed to be making over 1,000 of them per day. Worse still, we got a huge upsurge in orders in late 2020, early 2021, and we needed a second group to work on our product, but management refused to hire one for some reason. When we brought it up, we were either ignored or verbally abused. Our HR department did nothing, and our managers did almost nothing about it as well. After 3 years of this, I found another job at a company that paid better and had better hours. A few months later, my father, who worked at the same company, told me that in a manager's meeting, they were asked what the worst thing that happened that year was. Most said that my resignation was it. Apparently, after I left, a large number of people did as well. Not only that, but while I was there, most of the new people who were hired left within a month. Some were fired, but most simply quit. It was a nice experience after all. Story 3. While I agree Jehovah's Witnesses are a cult, it's probably best not to meet your whole staff through shared values that you don't actually believe in. If the owners met their entire staff at a gay bar, the same thing could happen if the staff found out they were against homosexuality all along. The reality is that we all have different principles we believe in, whether religious or non-religious. When those principles clash, sometimes people agree to disagree, but other times they feel too strongly and it causes conflict. This will never change, unless you can force everyone on Earth to agree with you in every important matter, but no human has the right or ability to do that. It's ignorant and self-absorbed to think your worldview is the only one, or to treat people you disagree with as subhuman. Some of the commenters I'm seeing needed to hear that. Instead of trying to force our lifestyles and beliefs on other people, we should aim to be respectful, whatever that may look like, given the situation. In the case of this company, most of the employees didn't give a 2 weeks notice, but at least the boss was respectful enough to keep quiet about what happened and stay long enough for the owner to find a replacement. I know there's a ton of conflict that arises in the world and has arisen throughout history solely because of competing ideologies or religions, but really they all kind of say the same thing. It's the golden rule of treating others the same way that you yourself would want to be treated. Putting yourself in someone else's shoes and visualizing how they feel as a result of a given action, to me, is the best way to tap into your internal compass of what's morally right or wrong. And that's what most religions try to preach as well, because at the end of the day, no one deserves any more or less than anyone else, and we are all equal. So really, as long as no one is suffering because of it, our differences in worldview should be celebrated on the basis that it adds some spice to life. Personally, I don't have a religion, but I am a fan of the short story The Egg by Andy Weir. Story 4. When I was in college, I worked at a pizza place. I got a call from the owner at around 6:30 in the morning on a Sunday asking me if I wanted to, number 1, be promoted to manager, and number 2, work double my normal hours for the next 2 or 3 weeks. Apparently, 3 of my coworkers, including the night manager, had gone to the bar and connected with a group of girls. At the bar close, the manager remembered that A, the pizza place had beer, and B, he had keys. The 6 of them broke into the place after hours, fired up the pizza ovens, and proceeded to get absolutely annihilated. The manager knew that we didn't open until 11 a.m. on Sunday, but for some inexplicable reason, the owner decided to come in at 6 a.m. to conduct inventory. He found the place utterly trashed, the pizza oven still running with 2 cooked pies at the end of the conveyor belts, and 6 bodies scattered around the restaurant in various states of undress. My 3 coworkers were fired on the spot. I guess if you were going to go out, that's the way to do it. Story 5. Worked for a time in a store that had mainly women working there, but a few guys like myself also. One day I arrived for work to find tension, and the female workers all looking at the only other male guy there. Turns out they had accused him of assaults. He gets called into the manager's office, and I go in as I am the union rep. Manager asks his side of the story, and then says the staff accused him of assaults and that they had evidence of his sperm. The moment he said that, I knew this to be a pack of lies, as not only was the man in question gay, he had no testicles due to some form of cancer. In good grace, the bloke agreed to prove it, and there he was, as smooth as Action Man down there. The manager apologized for almost an hour, and then looked at me and asked, in my capacity as union rep, if there would be any trouble over firing them. To which I reply, it's certainly okay if you frame it as gross misconduct. Out go the entire group of 12 women the week before Christmas. Story 6. When I was new at my job, it was the first time I ran an errand in the company truck, also with the boss's son. Boss had senior crew members follow us to make sure we didn't get into any trouble. We loaded the bags into a truck. There was a 7-Eleven type store next to the Lowe's. We both went into the store for pre-made sandwiches and cigarettes. The senior employee followed us and made sure we weren't buying liquor underage. He tells us to go back. Later, the 2 senior employees go in as we're leaving. The other people came back, and a beer can rolled out of the car. Later, they got caught drinking on the job and were fired. They left a 6-pack in the car. The boss saw this and put everything by the door and told the drunks to get their stuff and leave. Also found out the night shift fired people who found the beer and drank the rest of it. We immediately got promoted after a few months of work. Story 7. Agreed, but also from someone being vengeful because she didn't get to leave on her terms again by quitting for the 5th time. She didn't like the job. She had expressed to me once that it was too much BS to deal with for too little pay, and I agree with her on that. And if you think, just because she was the one reporting this all to corporate, that she was innocent of any of the same wrongdoings, then you would be incorrect. No manager was, not even me. No one wanted to lose their job for insubordination. So you did what your boss, the district manager, told you to do. The reason I said the lesson was not to hire out of nepotism is because he was the one telling people to do the wrong thing. I forgot to mention that point, sorry. And because his hiring of her is what led to his, and unfortunately others', termination. And by the way, I and several others weren't mentioned in her report to corporate because she liked us. Story 8. I still laugh about this one from time to time. Someone at work at a major big-name auto manufacturer gave a bejesus to another employee on the line in the middle of the shift. It was recorded and uploaded. Just a few seconds were uploaded, But it led to people in from all over making memes about it. And one happened to get around to one of the bigwigs. I know of at least 50 being fired, and was behind a couple of people at the red light when security handed them pink slips. They were walking up and down the line of cars, watching for anyone watching or sharing the video. It was an insane couple of weeks. Wasn't even the last mass firing. They had another after the George Floyd incident. A bunch of racists got mad when the company asked for 1 minute of silence. And, well, racist gonna racist, lost absolutely all respect for the company when 9 or 10 months later, they hired one of them back. Story 9. Worked at a major mattress store. The one on every corner? Yeah, that one. Memorial Day is huge for bed sales. Mandatory 14-hour days, 7 days straight by our new RVP. Every day we had a mandatory video we had to watch of him every morning sipping coffee in his pajamas or eating breakfast with his family. We had already been at work for 4 hours and he was just chilling at home. We had 70% of the team walk off the job by the middle of the week and several stores went dark. We missed the budget so badly that the CRO was emailing regular sales staff to find out what was happening as management lied to cover up and suck up. CRO went off and mandated managers work in the stores for all hours they required on holidays. Never had to work another crazy holiday after that. I was curious why Memorial Day and President's Day and all that are associated with mattress sales, so I looked it up. Turns out it's simply because long weekend holidays like Memorial Day, President's Day, and Labor Day traditionally allowed people to just think a bit more about the purchase that they were going to make before they pulled the trigger. Especially before e-commerce became a big thing, people would use the 3-day weekend to physically go to the store and shop. Now it just feels silly to go on a shopping spree on days that we're meant to honor veterans. Story 10. Worked in a warehouse that sold sports jerseys, t-shirts, and other sports-related merchandise. Summer was always the busy season, 6 to 8 hour workdays a week. April 2019, the bosses say a new schedule would be implemented for that summer. Of course, it was asked how this would affect how much people would normally make during the summer. Bosses said no. I did the math. 2-week pay period, old schedule, was 12 8-hour workdays. New was like 7 12-hour workdays per paycheck. They said it was to give employees more time off, which it did, but also cut 16 pay hours off from each paycheck. I pointed this out and they tried to gaslight me, but enough people understood that they just didn't want to pay overtime, and on top of longer workdays, a good amount of people left, me included. Story 11. Grandma was Jehovah's Witness, and she told me at 5 years old my parents were going to hell. Haven't spoken to or heard of her in almost 20 years. I don't know if she's even still alive. Liberate yourself before your descendants do and cut you out. Maybe you'll have a happier life not worrying about what gods think. 'Cause I got news. Heaven is on earth, with your loved ones. It ain't what's been promised for the distant future. It's the best memories you can make in your life right now. But you're wasting it prepping for the afterlife by trying to be an ideal human. You could just be yourself, please. The people oppressing you now aren't worth appeasing. Just go and find heaven. You don't even have to die or be perfect for it. Only someone who's cruel would make you do that. Story 12. I worked at a retail store for 8 years, and during that time, the district manager hired one of his friend's wives as an assistant manager. She worked for the company for a couple of years and quit several times within that period. Finally, the corporate had enough and stepped in and told him to fire her and tell her that she could no longer be rehired. Of course, she didn't like that idea and went to corporate about all the bad practices she witnessed going on in several of the stores. Writing off products to compensate for shrink right before inventory was the big one. Needless to say, this cost him. His loss prevention manager, 6 store managers, and several assistant managers their jobs. The lesson here is don't hire someone based on nepotism. Story 13. My brother works at a tire change shop at a Costco. I can't remember the full details, but I remember that him and our entire family were out of town on vacation for a week, and when we returned, the vast majority of his coworkers got fired over an incident involving stealing specific types of tires. From what I remember, it was everyone who did take it and knew they were and didn't stop them, with one of whom was an old friend and roommate of ours. My brother was spared, thankfully. Since he was on vacation at the time, he was obviously cleared of any suspicion of involvement. But it sucked mainly due to him being close with many of them, having worked with them for years. Story 14. I work at a factory that lost roughly 63% of the total staff when they tried to mandate a 12-hour shift on rotating schedules. I'm on the weekend, so I already have 12-hour shifts, but a lot of weekday people can't do that due to being single parents. The best part was management looking at us with a smile and saying they will help us conform to their new schedule. Also informed us there will be no benefit to the employees or raise. In other words, a lot of people will be working many extra hours without getting raises and overtime being removed. I was told the weekday shifters started throwing things and yelling. Story 15. Worked for a company whose business model had gone completely out of date. They were a printer of medical diagnostic manuals, stuff that had become available on this newfangled thing called the Internet. And whatever authority in charge of the standard had finally put all that information online in easily searchable form for healthcare professionals. This was the late aughts. The company hung on for a few more years, but cue the mass quitting as everyone, myself included, saw the 2013 financial statements and realized, correctly as it turned out, that the company would be bankrupt by the end of 2014. Even Donald Trump's accountants couldn't cook those books into anything edible. Story 16. Literally just happened to me. Attended workplace orientation. Guy who never turned in a background check was a registered offender. I contacted the police after only having worked a total of 1 hour with the company. Not only was he assaulting me at work, he tried to follow me home as well. A company that needs 120 employees currently sits at 67 employees total. Can't imagine them lasting much longer. The food is some of the best food I've eaten. Unfortunately, the manager fumbled the most important thing in customer service: vetting employees. Story 17. We got a new client who required background checks and drug tests on all of us employees. Our whole place got tested. A couple days later, I walked in for my shift and half the workers were gone, along with the shift lead. Eventually, the grapevine revealed a bunch of people flunked the drug tests, and shift lead guy had lied about his military record and got caught. Ironically, another manager was a convicted offender, soliciting rather than other much worse offender crimes, but he kept his job because he had always been totally honest with management about it. That worked out fine until we got a new boss from out of state who refused to allow it. Story 18. When I was in high school, I worked at a Taco Bell that was right across the street, as there was an in-school program that allowed students to work and get credits towards graduating. During the 2 years I worked there, the manager moved out of state and a new manager took over. Now, the issue with this is it was time for our yearly evaluation for raises. The manager didn't know the people or how they worked, so she decided that, to be fair, she would give everyone a 2-cent raise. That's right, 2 cents. Needless to say, the entire staff quit that day. Story 19. My time to shine. I work in a prestigious car brand. This brand was taken over by another dealership. Sold dealership because it's in the Middle East. Some of the technicians were from the previous dealership, applied and landed a job. Fast forward 6 months after not receiving their incentives, because they had hardship on doing calculations somehow, they paid them 150 fils, which equals to half a dollar. Needless to say, 40 technicians resigned, and they were left with around 20 or so technicians. After years, this company still has hardships in paying on time for BS reasons. Story 20. 2 large software teams at Massive Software celebrated being joined into a new super team. Yay! Midway through the catered party at a swanky hotel, the DJ announced that the boxes being stacked in the corner by security contained the personal effects from the desks of those no longer working for the company. By the way, your access cards and passwords have all been neutralized. Drink up and thanks for your hard work. The merger of the 2 groups resulted in a 60% overstock of duplicated job roles. We lost more than half the workforce in a single day. Good times. Ooh, this is brutal. almost like that scene from Succession where Ken buys out Walter and then turns around and guts it, firing all the employees at once. Pretty heartless. But if you've got the money to shell out for severance packages, then I guess there's no law preventing you from sudden mass layoffs. If it is to be said, then so it be. So it is. So it shall. Story 21. We take our religion into consideration when picking a job. That is, we would not work for an abortion clinic, but we would not just leave our non-witness coworkers hanging. We would not leave the customers hanging. Too much has to go into consideration before everyone leaves. Meetings would be had, emails definitely sent out. That whole first story could have easily led to lawsuits from so many people and unwanted attention. At least that's how it is now. I'm aware how the organization was 30 years ago, maybe not be the same that it is now. Story 22. Jehovah's Witnesses disfellowship people. It is similar to being excommunicated, but we do not call it that. Maybe the person used that term to be easier to understand, and we keep business and religion separate. Usually. I wonder how long ago this story was, because some changes have been made. If it's a private business owned by a Jehovah's Witness, this can definitely happen. But a public one? I don't know. Story 23. I worked for an independent mom and pop-style discount store in Colorado for about 4 years. The owner passed away, and his wife tried to carry on, but he was the business guy, so without him, the store was going downhill. After a few months, she decided to sell the store. The guy that bought the store kept us employees, 4 of us, on for exactly 3 months, and then fired everyone, on Christmas Eve. Story 24. Though your sentiment is something I agree with, having people put on a registry for false accusers will inevitably have some people, who are correctly accusing others of assaults, put on the registry wrongly, because there's lack of evidence. Plus, it stops people coming out about abuse cases. That being said, these women should serve some punishment because this is absolutely disgusting. Story 25. A scammer called into a Home Depot claiming to be from a regional corporation. The manager on duty answered the call, and the scammer instructed the manager to go over to the hardware store, use several power tools, and break into the store's cash vaults. The moron did it and caused all the salaried management at that store to be fired. Story 26. Story 1 is the reason why religion needs to die. I was expecting this to be about some massive fraud or embezzlement when the place closed. Instead, it ends up being religious busybodies ruining other people's lives. If I were the narrator, I'd almost be tempted to go back to the ISP owner and say, I'm glad I didn't walk out that day. Story 27. If a corporation was going to drop the hammer like that a week before Black Friday, they should have sent some cashiers from other locations there. When I worked at a national chain in college, myself and others had to go to another location to help them out. In total, 4 other locations came and assisted this new location. Story 28. The incident with the fiber optic cable, I hope every one of them who got fired sued the crap out of that company. Surely insurance on the construction companies or the cable company's part would have covered that. Human error is a thing. Accidents happen. None of them deserve to lose their jobs. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.